What is a life worth? Is it $10? Is that the price of a heartbeat, of breath in the lungs? The auctioneer's voice was a rhythmic blur, a torrent of numbers and words that filled the dusty air of the livestock yard. For Jedediah Stone, standing at the back, the noise was just a backdrop to the quiet tragedy in the center of the pen. It was a mare, old, her coat the color of a faded dusk, ribs showing like waves on a sandbar. And her eyes, they were clouded over, milky and vacant. She was blind. The crowd murmured. A few men chuckled. On the other side of the ring, Marcus Thorne, a man whose wealth was as vast as the land he was swallowing up piece by piece, smirked. He leaned over to his foreman, said something, and they both laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel. "Do I have $10? $10 for the mare?" the auctioneer barked, his patience wearing thin. "Going once for 10, going twice." Jedediah's hand, calloused and stiff from 68 years of hard labor, went up. It wasn't a thought. It was an impulse, a deep, quiet protest against the laughter, against the waste. "Sold to the old man in the back for $10. The gavel cracked like a whip. The laughter from Thorne's section grew louder. Jed ignored it. He walked his slow, steady walk to the payment counter, pulled a worn leather wallet from his faded jeans, and carefully counted out a $10 bill. The bill was as tired and wrinkled as he was. As he led the mare out, her head low, she startled at the clang of a metal gate. Jed stopped and ran his hand down her neck. Her skin trembled, but then she leaned into his touch, a silent surrender. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her story. He only knew she was his now, and he was a man who took care of what was his. The drive back to Three Creeks Ranch was slow. Jed's old truck rattled on the gravel road, kicking up a plume of brown dust. The mare, who he decided to call Luna, stood quietly in the stock trailer, her balance steady despite the bumps. Jed's ranch wasn't much. The fences sagged, the barn needed a new roof. The bank sent letters he no longer bothered to open. He was land-rich and cash-poor, the last of a line holding on to a legacy that was slipping through his fingers like dry soil. That night, the sky put on a show. The Perseid meteor shower was at its peak. Jedediah sat on his porch, a mug of coffee warming his hands, and watched the streaks of light tear across the canvas of the cosmos. He'd seen it every August of his life, a celestial clock marking the passage of another year. He thought about his father and his grandfather, who had watched this same sky from this same porch. He thought about the $10 in his pocket that was now a horse in his paddock. When he finally went to bed, the sky was still raining fire. He woke just before dawn to a strange sound, a persistent, low whinny from the paddock. It wasn't a sound of distress, but of insistence. He pulled on his boots and went outside. Luna was standing at the gate, her head turned towards the east, towards the vast open range of his property. When she heard him approach, she whinnied again and pushed against the gate with her head. "Easy, girl," Jed said softly. "What's got you so worked up?" Jedediah Stone had lived on this land his entire life. He knew every rock, every type of soil. He had never, ever seen a rock like this. He held the strange, heavy stone in his palm, its density a puzzle. Luna stood beside him, suddenly calm, as if her work was done. Jed looked from the rock to the blind mare, a flicker of an impossible idea igniting in his mind. He shook his head. It was ridiculous, a coincidence. He slipped the rock into his jacket pocket, the weight of it a constant, nagging question. A few days later, a truck he didn't recognize pulled up to his ranch. A younger man, maybe 30, stepped out. He had a kind face and observant eyes. "Mr. Stone," he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Thorne, Eris Thorne. I'm the new vet in Sage Creek. Just doing my rounds, introducing myself." Jed shook his hand, his eyes narrowing slightly at the name. Thorne. Any relation to Marcus Thorne? Arissa's smile tightened just a fraction. "He's my father. We don't see eye to eye on most things." The honesty was disarming. Jed relaxed. "Well, Dr. Thorne, welcome. I've got an old mare I just acquired. Blind. Maybe you could take a look at her when you have a moment." "Of course," Aris said, his gaze shifting to the paddock where Luna stood. "She's a beauty." He spent a half hour with Luna, checking her teeth, listening to her heart, his movements gentle and professional. "She's old, and the blindness is permanent," he concluded. "But she's in remarkable shape otherwise. You're taking good care of her." As Eris was packing his bag, Jed couldn't help himself. He pulled the strange rock from his pocket. "Say, you're a man of science," Jed began, feeling foolish. "Ever seen a rock like this?" Eris took it, his eyebrows shooting up as he felt the weight. He turned it over, examining the black fusion crust. "Where did you find this?" "Out in the east pasture," Jed said, gesturing vaguely. The drive to Laramie was 2 hours of Jed's old truck rattling and his mind racing. He felt like a fool walking into the imposing science building on campus, a dirty old rancher holding a rock. He found the geology department and was eventually shown into the office of a professor, a woman with graying hair and an intense, focused energy. She took the rock, and just like Eris, her expression changed the moment she held it. She placed it on a scale. She scraped a tiny sample. She looked at it under a microscope. An hour passed. Finally, she looked up at Jed, her eyes wide. "Mr. Stone," she said, her voice hushed, "this is a chondrite, a specific, iron-rich variant. Based on its density and condition, a collector would pay a significant sum for this. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars." Jedediah just stared at her. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Tens of thousands. That was more than a number. It was a new roof. It was debt paid off. It was survival. The professor leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "But I have to warn you, the world of meteorite hunting is small and competitive. A find like this, from a new location, news will travel. You need to be very careful who you tell. People can get aggressive." Jed's hand instinctively went to the pocket where the rock had been. He stayed silent, his face a granite mask. "I'll make you an offer," Thorne continued, walking closer. "That blind mare of yours, I'll give you $5,000 for her. Cash, right now." Thorne laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Don't be a fool. She's a broken-down animal. I'll give you 10,000. That's more money than this dump has seen in 20 years. "I said, she's not for sale," Jed repeated, his blue eyes locking with Thorne's. He returned to the ranch house, exhausted and defeated. As he was parking the ATV in the barn, he heard it. The sound was unmistakable. The groan of his old truck's ignition, followed by the roar of the engine turning over. Jed spun around, his blood running cold. A dark figure was in the driver's seat. The truck's headlights flashed on, pinning a single terrified target in their glare. The truck wasn't just being stolen. The engine screamed as it accelerated, tires spitting gravel. It was aimed directly at the small paddock, directly at Luna, who stood frozen, her head up, her blind eyes facing the terrifying, fast-approaching sound. Without a thought, without a moment of hesitation, Jedediah's hands, which knew the feel of a rifle stock better than a lover's touch, found the cold steel of the shotgun leaning against the barn wall. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At one end, a blind, terrified horse. At the other, his own truck, a 2-ton weapon of murder. There was no time to aim for the driver, no guarantee of hitting him through the windshield. There was only one shot. He raised the shotgun, the smooth wood familiar against his cheek. He didn't aim for the engine. He didn't aim for the cab. He led the front left tire by a foot, the way his father taught him to lead a running coyote, and squeezed the trigger. The roar of the 12-gauge shotgun was deafening in the enclosed space of the barn. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the truck's front end lurched violently to the left as the tire exploded. The vehicle swerved, its engine screaming as the driver fought the wheel. It missed the paddock fence by inches, plowed through a line of sagebrush, and crashed head-on into a massive cottonwood tree at the edge of the property. The sound of rending metal echoed in the sudden, profound silence. The engine died. A door creaked open, and a figure scrambled out, stumbling into the darkness and vanishing into the hills. Jed didn't watch him go. He dropped the shotgun and ran, his old heart pounding against his ribs. He vaulted the paddock fence with an agility that defied his years. Luna was trembling, her hide slick with sweat, her head thrown up, ears swiveling wildly at the sudden silence. He reached her side, his hands running over her, searching for any injury. Her leg was scraped raw where she had scrambled back from the fence, bleeding slightly, but she was alive. She was standing. He stood there for a long time, calming the mare, calming himself. The anger came later, cold and hard. This was no longer about harassment. This was an attempt to murder an innocent animal, to destroy the one thing he had that Thorne wanted. He knew he couldn't handle this alone. He limped back to the house, his knee aching, and picked up the phone. There was only one person he could think to call. An hour later, headlights cut through the darkness again, but this time it was Eris Thorne's practical work truck. He stepped out, his face etched with concern. "Jed, your message said it was an emergency." His eyes took in the scene. The crashed truck, the demolished tire, the shotgun lying on the ground by the barn. His professional gaze immediately found Luna. What happened? "He tried to kill her," R.S. said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, heavy with a lifetime of understanding his father's capacity for cruelty. He straightened up and looked at Jed, the faint light from the porch catching the resolve in his eyes. "My father believes that money can buy anything, that if he can't buy it, he can take it, and if he can't take it, he will destroy it. He won't stop." He paused, taking a breath. "I want to help you, Jedediah. I'm a scientist. This thing with Luna, her finding that rock, it's impossible. And impossible things are my specialty. But more than that," he said, his gaze fixed on the quiet, blind mare, "what he's doing is wrong." For the first time, Jed saw the son, not the father's name. He saw a man of principle caught in the shadow of a tyrant. Jedediah Stone had been a loner his whole life, but he knew when to accept a hand offered in good faith. "All right, son," he said, giving a slow nod. "Let's see what this science of yours can do." The alliance was forged in the quiet hours of the Wyoming dawn. Eris returned with coffee and a plan. He had spent the rest of the night researching. "The Perseids," he began, spreading a topographical map of Jed's ranch on the old kitchen table. "The shower produces a strewn field. That first rock Luna found, the Herald, is likely one of the smallest pieces. The bulk of the mass, the main meteorite, would have traveled further along the trajectory." He pointed to a region on the map. "Based on the angle of entry, it should have landed somewhere in this quadrant. In the Badlands, it's rough country." "I know it," Jed said. "Haven't run cattle out there in years. It's all canyons and arroyos. Hard to even walk, let alone search." It sounded like fantasy, but Jed had seen what Luna could do. He looked at the heavy rock sitting on his mantelpiece. He looked at the blind horse. There was a connection. He felt it in his bones. So what's the plan? The next few days were a strange mix of painstaking science and quiet faith. Jed and Eris would lead Luna into the rugged, empty quarter of the ranch. The mare, who should have been terrified in the unfamiliar, treacherous terrain, moved with that same eerie confidence she'd shown before. She would lead them for hours, her head up, her ears working, sniffing the dry air. Eris walked beside her, holding a handheld magnetometer, watching its needle jump and quiver in a way that defied geology. Jed walked with his rifle, his eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines. He knew Thorn was watching. He could feel it. They found 2 more pieces. One was the size of a loaf of bread, discovered in a dry creek bed. The other, no bigger than a fist, was wedged in the roots of a juniper tree. Each find sent a jolt of excitement through them. Eris confirmed they were the same type of chondrite. They were building a trail of cosmic breadcrumbs. Jed sold the 2 smaller pieces, quietly, through the university professor, netting him enough cash to fix his truck, replace the fence, and hire a couple of day laborers to help round up his scattered herd. It was breathing room. But it was also confirmation for anyone who was watching. The old man wasn't just lucky once. His land was producing. The pressure from Marcus Thorn escalated. He couldn't use force so openly again, not after his man was seen fleeing the crash. So he turned to lawfare. A surveyor's truck appeared at the edge of Jed's property, planting stakes along a disputed boundary line that had been settled by a handshake between Jed's grandfather and the previous landowner 70 years ago. A lawyer in a suit delivered a cease and desist letter, claiming any minerals found in the disputed zone belonged to Thorn Dominion. Jed just handed the letter to Eris. "His own son," Jed muttered, shaking his head. Eris read it, his face grim. "He's bluffing. The county records are clear. He has no claim. He's just trying to scare you, to slow you down." He pulled out his phone. "I know the county clerk. I'll make a call. We'll shut this down." The legal threat evaporated within a day, but the message was clear. Thorn was out of patience. The hunt for the motherlode became more urgent. They knew it had to be close. One afternoon, Luna stopped at the edge of a deep, washed-out canyon. She refused to go any further. She pawed at the ground, whinnying, her whole body tense. "This is it," Eris whispered, his eyes on the magnetometer. The needle was going crazy. "It's not on the surface, it's down there. It has to be." They looked into the canyon. It was a 20-foot drop, the walls sheer and unstable. But at the bottom, something was wrong. The ground wasn't flat. There was a mound, a shape that didn't belong, covered by dirt and brush washed down from seasons of rain. It was a subtle hump in the landscape, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. It took them the rest of the day to find a safe way down. They returned the next morning with shovels, ropes, and a growing sense of awe. They started to dig. An hour in, Jed's shovel struck something with a dull, metallic thud that vibrated up the handle and into his bones. It wasn't the sharp clink of striking rock. It was a deep, resonant thunk. The sound of hitting something massive, solid. They dug faster, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the scraping of their shovels. First, they uncovered a curve of dark, fusion-crusted metal. Then more and more. It wasn't a boulder. It was the exposed crown of a single, immense object. It was easily the size of a small car, a giant teardrop of cosmic iron and stone that had buried itself in the Wyoming earth countless lifetimes ago. "We found it, Jed," Eris said, his voice full of wonder. "She found it." Jed looked up from the canyon, a feeling of deep unease washing over his triumph. The sky was darkening, the clouds turning a bruised purple gray. The wind was picking up, carrying the smell of rain. A storm was rolling in. And on the distant ridgeline, a glint of light. The reflection of sunlight off a pair of binoculars. They were not alone. The moment they had found their salvation was also the moment they had run out of time. Thorn knew. The storm broke with a primal fury. Rain came down in blinding sheets, turning the canyon floor into a slick, treacherous morass of mud. Thunder cracked overhead, so close it felt like the sky was splitting apart. Jed and Aris huddled under a makeshift tarp, the wind threatening to rip it from their grasp. Their plan to get a winch and lift the meteorite would have to wait. Now it was about survival. "He'll use the storm as cover," Jed shouted over the wind. "He'll think we're trapped down here." "Then we can't be here when he comes," Aris yelled back, his practical mind already working. "The walls are too slick to climb now. There's only one way out, the way we came in. We have to make a stand at the mouth of the canyon." They gathered their gear, leaving the half-buried meteorite to the rising mud. They scrambled back up the winding path they'd found, the ground dissolving under their feet. They reached the top, soaked and shivering, just as a pair of headlights cut through the deluge. It was Marcus Thorne's oversized truck. It slid to a halt 20 yards away. 2 doors opened. Thorne got out of the driver's side, a heavy-duty winch cable coiled over his shoulder. He wasn't wearing a smirk anymore. His face was a mask of grim determination, his expensive clothes already soaked through. From the passenger side emerged the same man who had crashed Jed's truck. He was carrying a tire iron. "Evening, Stone," Thorne shouted, his voice barely audible over the gale. "And Aris, I should have known you'd pick the losing side. I'm here for my property." "This is my land, Thorne," Jed yelled back, his hand gripping the stock of his rifle. "The rock doesn't care about your deed," Thorne roared, gesturing to the man with the tire iron. "It's worth more than you, your ranch, and your worthless family legacy combined. I'm taking it. And the horse, a finder's fee." Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene in a stark, terrifying tableau. Thorne, a man pushed past reason, his hired thug advancing slowly, and Jed and Aris standing their ground at the edge of a muddy, flooding canyon. Behind them, back at the ranch, Luna was safe in the barn. She had done her part. Now it was up to Jed. Suddenly, Aris grabbed Jed's arm. "The truck!" he yelled, pointing. "He left it running!" An idea, desperate and brilliant, sparked in Aris's mind. He looked at Jed, then at the advancing thug, then back at the truck. "Distract them!" Jed didn't need to be told twice. He raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air, the crack echoing with the thunder. Thorn and his man flinched, their attention fixed on Jed. In that split second, Aris broke from cover. He didn't run at the men. He sprinted, low and fast, in a wide arc towards the passenger side of Thorn's idling truck. Thorn saw the movement too late. "Get him!" he screamed. The thug charged after Aris, but the vet was younger, faster, and fueled by a righteous fury. He reached the open passenger door, dove inside, and slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The truck, left in drive, lurched forward. But Aris wasn't driving. He was scrambling across the seat, his target the gear shift. Thorn, realizing what was happening, ran towards the driver's door, but it was too late. Aris yanked the gear lever into reverse. The massive truck's tires spun in the mud, then bit hard. It shot backwards, not towards the men, but directly towards the edge of the canyon, just a few feet from where Thorn was standing. Thorn scrambled to get out of the way, his polished boots slipping in the mud. He fell, landing hard on his back. The thug, caught between the reversing truck and the edge, had nowhere to go. He made a desperate leap to the side, landing in a heap of tangled limbs. The truck continued its backward trajectory. The rear wheels went over the edge. For a heart-stopping moment, the massive vehicle teetered, its engine screaming. Then, with a groan of stressed metal and a cascade of mud and rock, it plunged backwards into the canyon, landing with a cataclysmic crash directly on top of the one thing Thorn had come to steal. The ground shook. There was a final, terrible crunch of metal against alien stone, and then only the sound of the rain and the wind remained. Marcus Thorn was on his hands and knees, staring in disbelief into the abyss where his truck and his fortune were now buried together under tons of mud and water. He was ruined. Defeated not by a bullet, but by his own blind greed and the quick thinking of the son he despised. Jed walked slowly forward, his rifle now held loosely at his side. He looked at the pathetic, mud-covered figure of Marcus Thorn, then at Aris, who was climbing out of the truck's cab on the other side of the canyon, having jumped clear at the last second. He looked at the destroyed truck and the buried meteorite. The money was gone, at least for now. It would take a massive, expensive operation to recover the meteorite from the wreckage and the flooded canyon. But Thorn was broken. The threat was over. He had his ranch, he had his friend, and he had his horse. He realized with a clarity that cut through the storm that he had never been richer. Weeks later, the warm autumn sun bathed Three Creeks Ranch in a golden light. The fences were mended, the barn had a new, gleaming metal roof, and a small, well-built stable now stood beside it, a sanctuary for a handful of other rescued, useless animals. The world knew the story of the Wyoming crater, and a university consortium was carefully, methodically working to excavate the incredible meteorite, a process for which Jedediah Stone would be compensated beyond his wildest dreams. Marcus Thorn, facing charges for his various illegal acts and financially ruined, had disappeared, his empire crumbling into dust. Jedediah stood by the fence, grooming Luna's now shiny coat. Her blind eyes were as milky as ever, but she was calm and content. Aris leaned against a fence post nearby, sipping coffee. They were partners now, in a way. Aris managed the scientific and legal side of the meteorite find, ensuring Jed was treated fairly, while Jed taught the young vet about the land, about the rhythm of the seasons, about a life built on something more solid than money. "You know," Aris said, watching the blind mare nuzzle against Jed's shoulder, "people still ask me how she did it. I give them theories about magnetoception and hypersensitive hearing, but I don't really know." Jed smiled, a rare, full smile that smoothed the lines on his face. He ran his hand down Luna's strong neck. "Some things," he said softly, "don't need a scientific explanation. They just need to be believed in." He had paid $10 for a life, and in return she had given him his own life back, richer and more meaningful than any fortune buried in the ground. After everything Marcus Thorne did, was Jed right to let the law handle him? Or should he have taken justice into his own hands during the storm?